Why are you on the stage? What's happened in your life that makes you someone who we should all listen to?
Well, I came to Utah in 1994 as a refugee from Somalia. I left persecution, I left discrimination, all kind of difficulties a human being can go through. And when I came to the United States, I was only looking one thing, which is a safe place, a place where I can exercise my rights. I've never voted in my life when I was in Somalia. In the United States was the country that I felt that will give me that opportunity that I can exercise my right to vote. So as many other refugees, more than 3 million refugees were resettled in the United States to come to this land of freedom. And they were hoping that a lot from this country. But I think when we elect a president that have said so many things that hurted that many people, we're really in shock. I mean, and I represent that shock to many other refugees that are coming to us and saying what is next for us. All we could tell them was that, let's see. We heard what the president-elect said, but let's see his actions, whether that's going to change or not. But I think we're hoping that freedom still exists for us, for everybody in the United States, that we could exercise our rights, and also that we're all inclusive. Because I feel that, in the United States is the place that gives everybody that opportunity to be included.
How do we kind of reconstruct a civil dialogue and a civic discussion to move us forward? So I keep trying to turn my thoughts to that.
I'm the youngest of 11 children, and I have 7 older brothers. So maybe there's something I can contribute to civility and compassion and productivity, because it's really been formative in my life.
The reason why I'm probably here today is, even though I'm pretty conservative, have pretty conservative views, as Senate President, I feel like we can't make voices irrelevant. And so I've reached out to the minority party in the Senate. We have 5 out of 29 that are Democrat. And so, they can easily become irrelevant in our discussions, but I've chosen to encourage their voice and to speak out on the issues. And while sometimes we get upset at each other for what we say in a committee or on the floor of the Senate, we need to be patient with one another and respect that there are differing views.
This is as revolutionary an election as my lifetime. In the conduct of it, in the lack of discussion around the issues of our day, and in just the way it unfolded.
Where do you see the possibilities of a fresh start or a new beginning or a new day? Where would you begin if you could wave your magic wand and say, here's something really exciting that could happen on the local level or in a state legislature or in faith institutions or at a university? Give us a couple of sparks, or what used to be called points of light back in the George H.W. Bush day. Tell us a couple of points of light from the state of Utah that you think might help illumine this moment. Who wants to begin? Natalie.
May we go to the federal level on this question,
Sure.
if it's okay? So here's the spark of light I'd love to see. If you're a Republican like I am, we were really disappointed when the Affordable Care Act passed and not a single Republican crossed over, and shame on the Republicans for that, but also shame on the Democrats for getting so divisive. So now you have just a complete opposite situation. Now the Republicans have the House, Senate, and the administration, and we know that the Affordable Care Act is going to be looked at very closely. I would love to see my fellow Republicans create an environment to be real change and compromise. I use the term avoid a lonely victory. So one of the sparks of light that I could see is if And we saw some of it, this week, right, with the president-elect giving his interview to the Wall Street Journal and saying, some parts of Obamacare I like. And so that would be a spark of light to me to see us kind of saying, Americans need health care coverage. Pre-existing conditions have been a problem. It's not all the insurance company's fault. We have a bloated system. We got to figure it out. I would love to see something there.
Organization of faith that helps those that are in need the most. I think our concern is that, and we would like to see, is that our doors are not being closed. I think that's what the biggest concern that we have, and that we would like to see that the new administration to continue to do what America stands for, that we are a nation of immigrants. This country is built by immigrants. We would like to see that those millions of immigrants, undocumented that are in our country, be given a path to citizenship. We would like to see that the refugees who are fleeing persecution being allowed to come to our country, regardless of their backgrounds, whether they are Muslim, non-Muslim, because as long as they fit the definition of a refugee, they need to be allowed to come to the United States.
A legislative body is a body that receives ideas, and they come from a spectrum of folks in our society, and we have to accept them and debate them. And I often have constituents say, why are you even talking about that? That's the dumbest idea I've ever seen. But at least somebody thought it was a decent idea and got a sponsor to sponsor it. And there's ways for us to deal with that issue, but we have to deal with it. And that's the beauty of our system. It gives people an opportunity to bring ideas, and we debate them. And if we don't like them, we say no. And there's some hard feelings and sometimes despair because your issue didn't get passed.
I didn't appreciate this for a very long time, but this almost unique ability of people in Utah to talk to one another with solutions as an objective. And I guess the way I would turn this in terms of a light going forward, and some of this has been on the discussion that's been happening earlier today, is it happens to an amazing degree at the local and regional level. Having regional government is an abhorrent idea in Utah. And yet we have some of the strongest regional decision-making anywhere in this state.
I want to add to the discussion as well the impact that the business community have, and I think that's something that other states can learn from us. We have a very engaged business community in Utah. They're very informed, and if you look at some of the things that we're most proud of as a community, let's look at our rail network. We put in 70 miles of rail in 7 years, and a lot of people contributed to that. But the ballot initiative that paid for that was led through the Salt Lake Chamber, the state's largest business association. So they campaigned to get it on the ballot, then they raised all the money to go take it to the public, and then it happened. And that's an example. Usually a business community would be against a tax increase during a time of prosperity and surplus, which it was. Mm-hmm. And yet the business community saw a window to do something great to help our state, and they made it happen. One other example, we mentioned the immigration legislation and immigration reform in this state. The Utah Compact, which has been so heralded as a document that helped bring this community together, that was crafted within the walls of a business association.
I just want to say quickly that great things that we do here in Utah, and I always take an example of the work that I do. In the refugee resettlement world, public-private partnership is a very important role for us. And I think Utah, we do much, much better than the rest of the nation, especially when the church is when the religious organization coming together to work together, we could achieve a lot.
As a mayor and as someone who met regularly with local government officials around the country, we were astounded by the way discussions were happening at the federal level and in most cases at the state level that were so entrenched in in partisan ideology or petty discussions. When you're at the local level, you've got to get stuff done. You know, if people's garbage doesn't get picked up, they don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or what your ideology is. And that attitude sort of grounds us, you know. We've got to balance the budget. We've got to deliver regardless of what a state hands down to us in terms of our ability to raise revenues. We've got to figure out how to do it.
I'm going to use the saying to own your emotions. So the pain for me in this election cycle has really come from being a woman. And my sensibilities were violated. And it's not just the person we put in office, but it's that so many of my fellow citizens didn't feel that violation. And so, and for me it's hard because I do a few things publicly in this state, and sometimes it's kind of hard to speak out because you don't want to offend, and I'm going against my party here and different things, but I feel in this case like I really need to own my emotions and feel comfortable to say that this was unacceptable to me.
I'm going to say this saying, you know, the triumph of an evil is for good people not to do nothing. I think we all watched of what was happening, and whether we agree or not, I think we need to say that this is not all right, and reach out to the people that have been hurt. Because when I heard so many things that was said in this election, I felt hurt. So as many other people, and yet we're not seeing people reaching out to us or coming to the media saying, you know, this was not right.
We as a people are better than what we saw this year in national politics. And we can do this, and we have to do it.
And I have to say, one of the things that really I'm troubled with quite a bit with this past election, and there was a lot, by the way, but just one of the ideas, and I think about this for a minute. The polls were saying that a certain education level was voting for a certain candidate, and a certain education level was voting for a certain candidate. Or in other words, if you're dumb, you're voting for Donald Trump, and if you're smart, you're voting for Hillary Clinton. And I think that is the wrong way to start a dialogue of coming together. That because I'm smart and I've got all this education, I'm somehow now have a dispensation on the way things should be. And maybe that's part of the reason why we had the surprise night the other night.
Yeah. Well, as I'm sitting here looking across this end of the stage, and I'm an outsider of the state of Utah, what I'm seeing is a reddish politician and a bluish politician, and I don't know about you, but I can feel this level of trust and respect between these two men. And I feel that between all four of you, and I think that's what I'm feeling more than any piece of legislation or any particular innovation. What I'm feeling is a sense of respect and collaboration and dialogue between the folks here on the stage, and I guess that's the magic sauce I'd like you to talk a little bit about, because that clearly that magic sauce seems to be missing at the national level. And I know for a fact that it's missing in other states. So can you talk about, as chefs or as cooks, what's in that magic sauce? What makes that magic sauce work?
I think it's respect. These two are friends of mine, but I know that they have a lot of respect for one another, and they've come from different backgrounds. Mayor Becker came from Washington, D.C., came to our state, fell in love with it, and has devoted so much of his life to public service. And I think Senator Niederhauser sees that and respects it and works from there. And I think likewise, I should let them talk for themselves.
No, you're doing a good job.
As an observer. Well, as an observer. Yeah. Well, that's. Well, this is another thing. See, they're both backcountry skiers. And they share this love for Mother Earth and for, you know, the beauty of this state. And I think always compromise and problem solving starts with you respecting the life experience that got someone who thinks differently than you do.
Salt Lake City is very different than the rest of the state politically, and our values and our population, our demographics. And I can tell you, and Ben McAdams, who is now the county mayor, who worked with me, and our whole team, from the beginning we took on an issue that we knew was important and maybe would be groundbreaking for the state and even for the city. We factored in, how are we going to deal with folks at the state trying to overturn what is important to us and represents an important value for us. And the only way I can tell you we were able to do it was by going to people like President Niederhauser and others from the very beginning of the conversation and saying, look, this is going to be controversial. Here is what we are trying to do and why we're trying to do it. We want you to respect us in terms of it being what our community wants. And we want to hear what you believe. And we'll try to come up with something that hopefully can withstand your scrutiny and those who find abhorrent what Salt Lake City wants to do. Just like some people at the national level find it abhorrent what the state of Utah wants to do, right? But you know what? We were able to, in almost all cases, do that. But it is hard work, and it is painstakingly slow. But that's at least sort of a key to the way we were able to kind of weave our way through what we knew was really important in terms of the values and objectives of our community in respecting people and achieving an environmental protection in giving people greater opportunities, whether they were kids or people who are disadvantaged or refugees.
I think that's what many refugees who came to Utah feel the same way. Over 60,000 refugees live in Utah and feel the same way. And another good thing is that, like when last year, when about 27 governors said that they would not welcome Muslim refugees into their states, those of us who work with the refugee, we reach out to our governor's office and said, you know, I think Utah is better than that. And our governor immediately stood up and said, Utah will welcome any refugee, regardless of their background. And I think we feel that, you know, we could reach out to our political leaders. They would listen to us, and we have that voice. We could reach out to them and express our concerns, and knowingly that we would be listened to. And I think you don't have that everywhere.
For the rest of the country, this state, you say Utah, people think Mormon. You say Utah, they think Mormon. And I really want to ask you, what's the role of religion and faith in the fact that this state has, I'm sure for good and for ill, but it has a very powerful religious base right at the center of the culture. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's part of the sauce. Again, it's part of the magic sauce and also part of the challenge, I'm sure. But could one of you address that?
I'll do real quickly, and then I think there'll be others to add. But this is a tough topic, okay? But I'll try my best. So I'm LDS, and at the center of my faith is the concept of how we treat others. And a famous Mormon scripture has this terminology, aren't we all beggars? And Mormons are imperfect and all sorts of things that are not right sometimes in the way we conduct ourselves, but our core doctrine in so many places is a beautiful expression of loving your neighbor and that we are all beggars. So that's in a lot of Mormons' DNA of how they view the world, and maybe it helps.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a non-Mormon, I guess I would say this. There are divisions in this community along religious lines. And I will say, I'm sorry to say that I see it much more intensely felt. Maybe it's because it's a minority opinion and expressed by non-Mormons than Mormons. I find Mormons generally are more inclusive. And I'm generalizing, and I mean it to apply to small segments of our community, because I think that's really where it lies. Overall, people in this community, I think, welcome dialogue and differences of opinion, and while we may go to different churches, and that sometimes creates different social environments, when it comes to our interactions socially, out in our secular worlds, I don't find it an issue.
When I hear of people complaining about Mormons because they haven't been inclusive, it isn't because they haven't been taught to be inclusive. Because we have been taught.
As a Muslim and also working for Catholic organization and working a lot with the LDS, folks, I think that word, how can we help you? I hear that all the time, especially the work that we do, all the refugees that we bring in. Every single bed that they sleep with comes from the LDS Church. That support never wavered from the LDS Church. And also, as a Muslim, when 9/11 happened, where the Muslims were going through a lot of challenges in the United States, the first person that reached to us at our mosque was the leadership from the LDS Church and said, "We here with you. We're here to support you. If one religion is attacked, all religion is attacked." I hear that phrase so many times, and it gives me a lot of comfort to leave this community. That's why I live here in Utah, because knowingly that our Mormon friends would always stood with us when there is anything happen to any one of us in this community, and I've never felt that I'm in the minority here.
What have you learned about this challenge of dealing with difference and crossing the divide? What have you learned that you think, you're passing it on to your kids, or you were talking to a group and they said, what have you learned about how to do that? What's the main lesson, the main teaching that you'd want to pass on?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. Use these more than this. And seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think if we can all take that kind of approach, I think we'd have a lot less division and divisiveness, and just a good dose of respect, and knowing that there are differences of opinion, and not necessarily having to agree with those, but at least respecting that someone can have that opinion.
What I learned coming out of this election is that it's really what we're hearing people say. We've got to listen to each other. We've got to respect each other. We have to form at the individual level and the community level and the state level the civil dialogue that then creates the model of what hopefully could happen at the federal level. It isn't going to happen. At least I'll be shocked, because the same people are in place at the national level. It is going to happen from us taking hold of our lives and our communities and our states and having the kind of dialogue that produces the outcomes we want. Because we haven't been getting it, I don't think, this past year, certainly at the national level. And I think we can do that, and I know from what I've been hearing and participating and observing all day, I know we can do that. And if we can do it in Utah and other states and communities around the country, which I know can happen, because this kind of thing is going on spontaneously in other places. And we've got to build on that and find a way to network it.
Thank you. What an incredible panel. I leave this panel with great hope, great energy, and glad I flew across the Rocky Mountains to learn from Utah and want to bring some of it back to Colorado. So thank you all. You've been fantastic.
I do living room conversations, and the reason I do living room conversations is because living in Berkeley, California, there's this quality that's happened in our country where we've found it's impolite to talk talk politics, and we've become increasingly homogenous. And we know, the science tells us when we talk to people that share our views, that our views become more extreme in whatever direction they're going. And I don't think that's good for us. And the beautiful thing is that when we talk to each other, we find out that these people that we're not talking to are beautiful people that we even love and find huge value in. And my life is so much richer because Jacob is my dear friend. And, you know, and I understand a great deal more because Jacob speaks to me with great honesty, and we have things we totally disagree on, but we still love each other. And that is the piece that, you know, I see being demonstrated here. And I think, honestly, this is a place where faith communities can lead, because loving our neighbor is something that we all get at a gut level, that this is the kind of world we want to live in, the type of community we want to live in.
Florida is very different than Utah in that we're a very atomized state. So people come to our state from having lived their lives elsewhere, their civic connections are somewhere else, and they come to Florida. And so we're very individualized and atomized, and I should probably offer a broad apology to the whole country for all the Florida things that sometimes result from that. But specifically from a state that arguably started all this, it feels like we've been in a cycle of kind of equal and opposite reactions since 2000. And of course, with 9/11, that accelerated. And I wanted to offer a counterexample of equal and opposite reactions, and that's the Charleston church shootings. And I think that we saw there something that can happen nearly instantaneously to change the direction of the reactions. And it started with a faith community and with forgiveness that was nearly inexplicable. And all of a sudden, everything changed. And so this is what I want to say from Florida, speaking on behalf of all 20 million of us for a moment, to Utah, is that I think that you have something here that's really special. And I think it's the glue that connects you, and it's in no small part due to the LDS Church, as we saw. I think that you get that, and I think that it's those relationships that are going to change this. And so I believe that there's something really special here, that the country is paying attention to you right now. I mean, people from all across the spectrum were talking about what happened here. And I think something special can happen here that you can share with the rest of us, and we need you badly right now.
I realized toward the end of this last panel that the last panel and the previous panel is really the first time since this election, and I think before the election, because a number of us felt, almost whether we gave it language or not, what might and would happen, that my own broken heart is beginning to feel healed across the political divides because of what I have heard today. And I actually wasn't sure that that's what I expected. I was more of, how can we make a difference in the country? How can this panel help us move forward? How can we come together as Americans? But it does start at the personal level. And it starts at the heart level. And whether we've won or lost, this has been a challenging week, and it will be a challenging year. But I feel more prepared listening to the panelists to be able to go forward with more equanimity and more sobriety and more inspiration.
And then you have a guided conversation that's just about really listening. You know, you had some people sitting here that are talking about listening, and it's the most powerful stuff. It's funny, we have to be reminded sometimes that it's so powerful. But when we care about each other, we hear each other differently, and everything changes. And I'm hoping that with the help of Utah, we can have everything change, because this last election season has just been heartbreaking. And I've seen so many people, and they're not all progressives, that are kind of heartbroken about the way we're treating each other. And nobody wants to do that, and yet we somehow got stuck here. And so the beautiful thing is, when I talk to people and I see people, they don't want to be here there either, and I think we can make it happen together.
We need leaders in this country who want to represent the whole, who want to put country before party, where independents can actually run and win and not necessarily be part of a party. And I'd love to see how that could happen in Utah. I mean, we know some of the structural issues around money in politics and open primaries, et cetera. But we're going to need, particularly at the national level, a new kind of leadership, and particularly a millennial leadership that sees the world differently and acts in the world differently.
We need to all offer ourselves a little bit of forgiveness, because in some ways this was kind of the inevitable result of the changes in the way we communicate with each other. And we're now all finally catching on. Oh, that's what it does. And so we kind of need to say, okay, well, that was human, and now we need to turn our attention to fixing it. And I guess I wanted to riff a little bit off of what John said too, that I think is one of the advantages of what you have. I think that what's happened is that the way we communicate with each other has made it so that it's weakened all of our institutions in society, from the very top to the very bottom. So Congress is now divided left and right. The courts, we saw FBI leaking left and right, all the way down to communities. We fight surrogate battles for national issues that have nothing at all to do with what we're doing with our neighbors. And so I think you guys still have institutions. Churches too, again, are divided left and right. So basically, no wonder we got what we got, right? We got this just big old Hatfield and McCoy's feud, left and right. National, no institutions to provide the ballast that keeps us in connection with each other at all layers and levels. And so you guys have such a great place to start with that. So go.
I'd love to see the LDS Church and all the other faiths get together in an ecumenical, interfaith way in Utah and say, here's who we are. You want to come and campaign in our state. Here are our values. Honor our values or you won't get voted for.
My dream is that everybody becomes a leader and starts reaching out with, living room conversations are one tool, but there are all sorts of tools for making connections and having the kind of respectful, heartfelt relationships we want to have. And I heard a little bit of nudging to be competitive about showing the way. We could really use some competitive showing off in the name of being respectful and, wonderful human beings. I want some, just flaunt it in a big way. And, make my blue state feel shamed. It's okay with me.
My belief is that unless we have a transpartisan citizen movement with citizens across the divides, not forming a third party, but forming a new constituency, a third force, that we're going to keep going back and forth. And we're going to keep doing and undoing what one party and the other party does unless we have a new constituency with this new leadership that actually has power, can help elect people, and again, I really say, but not a third party, hold our leaders to the fire of collaboration, and pass legislation that serves the common good. Go Utah.